A recent study by researchers in British Columbia found that a low-carb, high-protein diet may reduce the risk of cancer and slow the growth of tumors. Joining us with more is natural health care expert Dr. Mark Mincolla. Thanks for being here this morning.
Great to be here. Thank you.
I think a lot of people are aware of this high-protein, low-carb. They think immediately Atkins. That's not necessarily what this study talked about, though.
No, this is really different. First of all, it's an animal study. Very relevant to humans, but the idea that proteins and carbs and the ratio between those proteins and carbs really influences hormones that are very powerful.
Now, why is it that they believe that having high carbohydrates influences hormones that can cause your body to be maybe more inclined and more susceptible to certain kinds of cancer?
Well, as we say, they're very powerful hormones called eicosanoids. They influence everything: immunity, inflammation, the way the body functions. And when we eat high concentrations of carbs in ratio to proteins, bad eicosanoids that support the development of cancer cells, etc., will come forth.
And yet one of the best ways to fight cancer is to have a lot of vegetables and some fruits, and those are all carbohydrates.
That's a great point. You know, the distinction between good carb, bad carb here. You know, there's high glycemic or high sugary carbs. We all know those, the ice creams, the white flour products, etc. Versus, as you point out, the vegetables and fruits, which are a whole different matter altogether. But the key here really with this study is the ratio between protein and carbs. The animals in this particular study that were looked at, 55% carbohydrate fed one group, 58% protein in the other group. The tumors progress so much slower in that protein group.
That's amazing because it's really not that much of a difference.
Well, it is. I mean, in terms of the amount of protein, 58% protein in one group and 55% carb in the other group.
Gotcha, okay. Very interesting. So is this then recommended for cancer patients? Should they be on this kind of a diet?
Well, you know, I think it's kind of breakthrough information. More work needs to be done. But I do think that we've seen up to this point in time a lot of research that does indicate that, yes, indeed, cancer seems to prefer these high sugary, high starchy kind of diets and really not thrive or prosper quite as well with a high protein diet.
You know, there are some studies that talk about acid levels in the bodies and how if you have a higher acid level than a base level, you are more susceptible to cancers. And proteins tend to be acidic in the body. So is there a place that you can search out for proteins that are more healthy then?
Well, I think that's a great point, too. And I think that the real objective here is to maintain like a 4-to-1 ratio of alkaline to acid. And that's not as tough to do when your proteins are balanced out with some of the type of carbs that you mentioned earlier, the vegetables in particular and the fruits, which are much more alkaline. So I think the idea is to not overdo the bad carbohydrates, you know, the high starchy, sugary stuff, to get the good lean proteins into that diet and to make sure that your carbs are largely healthy fruits and vegetables.
And so if we are looking at a ratio that we want to incorporate in our own diet, what should how many proteins should we have for every carbs that we have every day?
Well, we always like to say that, you know, the zone diet kind of was a breakthrough in this particular area. And Dr. Sears talked about a 3-to-4 ratio, 3 parts protein, 4 parts carb. There's a lot of debate about that, but I think the objective really comes down to making certain that the quality of your proteins are lean and healthy, and making sure that, more importantly perhaps, that the quality of your carbohydrates are really screened into fitting a fruit and vegetable type of profile as opposed to the high processed starchy stuff.
Very interesting. Always fun to have you on. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
If you'd like more information, all you have to do is go to maxhealing.com.